and away we go.
Great, thank you so much for that warm welcome, Andy. And as he mentioned, this is the session on resources for digital navigation. And we hope that by the time you get through this session, you will have found some links to materials and tools that you can use if you want to start doing digital navigation in your ABE program. I am Susan Wetenkamp-Brandt. I'm the Senior Manager for Educational Technology and Digital Literacy at Literacy Minnesota, and I will let my co-presenter introduce himself as well.
Hi, I'm Tom Cytron-Hysom, and I am the Consulting Manager for the Distance Learning Tech Grant through Literacy Minnesota, and I also manage the Northstar Digital Literacy Assessment Project.
And you'll see that I've got the support desk email on this slide, and both Tom and I are agents on that support desk. So if you want to contact either of us, you can actually get both of us on one email, and several other people too. So it's a really handy way to get a hold of us, and you can find the person who has the best answer to your question, and sometimes more than one, because you might get several people chiming in. So it's a great way to get a hold of us, and I encourage you to make use of it. All right, so what are we doing here today? We are providing an overview of what digital navigation is, why it's really important in today's environment, and really spend some time digging into available resources, both state level resources and national. So with that in mind, we're going to start with just a big picture overview of what is digital navigation. You asked that question to 3 different people, you might get 6 different answers. It's a kind of a new and evolving service, but it's something that does find a home in adult education as well as in other places in our community, such as libraries and workforce centers. So what is it? Where does it fit in our world? How does it benefit our learners? And if you want to start doing this work, what do you need to know to get started, and where can you find that information? And we'll spend a number of minutes looking at a number of different resources, websites that you might find useful. So I'm not going to read these definitions out to you because I know that you can read a lot faster than I can read to you. But I want to give you the kind of the big picture overview of what a digital navigator does. It's a person who's going to work with individuals. So they're not teaching a class, right? They're working one-on-one or maybe in small groups with individuals to make sure that they are able to connect to the internet, that they've got a device that's working for them, that that device has the apps on it and the links to things that they need, that they know how to use those things to achieve the goals that they have for the program they're participating in. And so digital navigators are developing a relationship with people over time. Sometimes it's a one-time meeting. You come in, you get your computer, you get an email address, you're good to go, and off you go to your next step. But oftentimes, especially the folks we work with, they need more support than that. And so it's an ongoing relationship over time, where the person is providing ongoing support and coaching and mentoring. Tom, do you want to talk a little bit about the importance of it?
Right. Well, I think all of us have become very aware in the last couple of years of a really wide range of equity issues in our society. And I really have come to believe that digital literacy is a really significant equity issue. I like this quote from Priyanka at the EdTech Center at World Education. So as to ensure a more equitable digital future, as digital learning and services increasingly are the new normal, we must ensure that support for developing digital resilience is radically accessible to all of us. And I think we have seen this play out in education and in society at large in the last couple of years, that if you did not have good broadband access and you didn't feel comfortable and at ease doing things online, you were pretty well shut out. And I think when you look at the statistics about who's dropped out of school in K-12 as well as adult ed, people who are having trouble accessing life-saving medicines if they get a COVID infection, a very wide range of daily activities, you'll see that there is a really strong connection with between those problems and people not having adequate digital literacy skills, adequate devices, and adequate connectivity. So one of the ways in which digital navigation can be very helpful is helping people overcome the barriers to being able to use computers well, and feeling confident about their ability to communicate with their teachers, with their co-students, as well as doctors, bankers, and a whole range of other people. Next slide. So I talked a little bit about impact of COVID and why this, one of the reasons that digital navigation has become so crucial. I was reading today, I think it was in the New York Times, maybe it was yesterday, about how difficult it is to find the various new medicines that have been developed to help COVID infections stay minor when people who are at high risk do get infected. And it can be a really difficult process involving lots of computer searching. And so there's a really direct example of how not being able to get on a computer and do an adequate search and so on really can affect your health and ultimately your life. We continue to see a great deal of migration of just daily life into the digital world. All the adults who are parents who were suddenly last year put in the position of having to supervise their children's learning online when they themselves may not have had much experience with computers and didn't really know what they were doing. Obviously, digital skills are crucial for education and employment. When we hire people, often recently, we never meet them in person. It's all done online. And many companies will not even, most companies, I think, at this point, will not even accept applications or resumes if they're not online. And there are more and more resources. We'll talk a little bit about those in a minute, such as the federal ACP program that provides subsidized home internet and other sorts of support services. But if people don't have the digital skills they need to access those things, to use those things, that access really will not make too much of a difference. So we talk a lot about the three-legged stool that involves skills, access to adequate broadband, and devices. And I think a lot of the earlier work that was done in terms of people's digital literacy really focused much more on devices and access and really neglected the skills area. So digital navigation is one way of remediating those needs that people have that they haven't been able to get good educational services to help them develop the skills they need to use the access, the broadband access, and the computers. Next slide. Let's see. So Susan, interrupt me if I take any of your slides. I think I'm still on those. So there's a new concept. Okay, so there's a new concept called, which we refer to as digital resilience, which is that learning basically, I don't need to read what's on the screen, but it's becoming digitally literate is not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process, and all of us face that every day as new software is developed, new sorts of things that we're supposed to do online happen. And so one of the things that we hope digital navigators can do is not only teach people the initial skills they need, but help them normalize that they aren't going to always know how to do various things because the things we need to do online are constantly changing. So we want to try to foster and nurture a resilient mindset so people don't feel so overwhelmed and they can build on the skills that they have. It's a little bit like a career pathway in the sense that you start one place and you keep moving upward as you learn more and so on. And I think all of us every day are having to learn and master various new skills, digital skills that we haven't had to master before. So in light of that, it's particularly significant that major studies show that 32 million US residents struggle just with lack of basic computer skills, which is pretty scary. One of the things that I found very interesting in the last few years is that initially there was the belief that lack of digital literacy skills mostly affected older people. And we've come to realize that that is really not the case. It certainly affects some older people, but it affects a lot of younger people as well. And part of the problem and challenge that we face sometimes is that some young people think they have really good digital literacy skills and really they know how to use Facebook, and that's about it. So part of what a digital navigator can do is work with those people to broaden their definition of digital literacy and teach them the base skills that they need to continue on their own learning paths. Next skill, I think this is Susan's.
This is where I'm going to take over. So thinking about digital navigation, if you're thinking, you know, this is a service I want to offer at my program, or maybe I want to do this in combination with my local library or something like that. What do I actually ask this person to do? If I'm going to hire a person or if I'm going to train a volunteer, what is it that this person is going to do? So they're going to support the full range, all of the pieces of the three-legged stool. They're going to help people get a device. They're going to help people get access, internet access. And then they're going to help them gain those skills, and also tech support ongoing, so the person can come back and check in. So what's happened in our program, we've been distributing computers, Chromebooks to a lot of our learners. And it turns out that 6 months after, you know, they've got this device, you know, their kid knocked it on the floor and the screen is cracked and they don't know what to do about that. Or the Chrome operating system needs to be updated and they don't know how to update it. So they're coming back in and they're checking in with our digital navigator saying, help, okay, I have access, I have a device, something's gone wrong and I don't know how to get back on track. So the navigator is really helpful in that whole relationship across the life of the device with the learner, so that they're not just at the upfront providing the initial point of contact and distribution, but ongoing. So it's a relationship of support and mentoring and coaching. So the navigator can talk with the individual and say, oh, you know, cracked screen, not something you can just fix at home. You're going to need that, get that repaired. Here's a place you can go to get that repaired. And this is about how much you're going to expect to pay, right? This is how much it's going to cost. And they can emphasize that sort of skill building and resilience as apps change, as operating systems change, and helping people to transfer what they know onto the new platform. And then also connections and referrals to other resources. So our digital navigator has found that a lot of the folks who are coming in and are presenting with a need for ongoing coaching around digital navigation have other complicated needs as well: homelessness, substance abuse, mental health, you know, brain injury, all kinds of other complicated issues. And the navigator has developed a really good ability to draw boundaries and say, these are the tasks I can help you with. For these other things, we're going to need to refer you somewhere else. But he has those relationships. He says, let me help you connect with this person at this agency so they can help you. So it's not just a cold, here's a business card, go call this person. It's a much more of a warm relationship based, let me help you make sure you are plugged in, connected to this other resource that's going to be able to help you. So it's really putting the learner at the center and treating them as a whole person, and not just sort of like, sorry, can't help you, here's another resource. So I'm going to stop here and have a little chance to hear from everybody in the audience in the text chat, or if you want to call it out and just unmute and turn on your camera and share what you're doing at your sites. Is anybody providing digital navigation services at your site? Is that formal or informal? Like maybe your teachers are doing this. Maybe you yourself are doing this kind of work. But maybe you don't think of it as digital navigation. Maybe your teachers don't think of it as digital navigation. So do you think there's anybody at your site providing this kind of service, formally or informally? And if you do have a specific individual doing digital navigation, do they have other roles? How many hours per week do they provide digital navigation? I'm curious to hear from everybody in the room. And Andy Elby, you're doing the digital navigation informally. Mm-hmm. Lead teacher, yep, informally as needed. I kind of expected that would be the case. I think a lot of teachers sort of just took this role on. Yeah, because they had to, right? We didn't have a choice, right?
Right. for our site, when we, of course, switched over to the doing Zoom and doing virtual stuff like that, I was helping a lot of people set up their cell phones and set up their computers to make sure they could attach to the Zoom. And then we had a connection with PCs for people, and we got computers donated so that our students could do them. And I've had to do a few things on those to keep them up and running.
Mm-hmm. So Lisa, at your program, you've got some tech folks who do this work?
Yeah, doesn't everyone have tech people?
No, they don't.
Oh, okay. I guess we're lucky.
Or informally, I would say I do have a staff person whose title is digital navigator, but he does more than just a digital navigation, right? He's also kind of informal tech support for the Learning Center itself, right? Making sure that computers in the computer lab stay running and helping with open labs and onboarding to distance learning platforms. So the role is digital navigator, but it's also sort of distance learning coordinator, lab support, tech support, right? We all wear many hats.
It sounds as if often what's happening is this is becoming yet another expectation that staff have kind of added to their job descriptions, which is understandable, although I can see that it would definitely put some strain on teachers who already are very fully engaged in their time they have.
Yeah, so teachers who are doing this informally on your regular work allocation, does it fit, or are you feeling stretched? I'm curious. Are you able to do it? Or is it really pulling you in too many directions? Jason says he's stretched. Joan too.
I am curious. We know that the ABE programs in Minnesota received an extra $10 million, one-time allocation of $10 million this year from the governor's allocation of federal funds. And one of the hopes was that programs would use that to build up their infrastructure. So I'm just curious whether any of the programs any of you have used any of that money to hire somebody to do, or to add hours into somebody's schedule specifically to do digital navigation.
I imagine not too many people did, because it's one time, right? And you don't want to build
Right.
staff allocations that you then have to end, right? Well, thanks for the chat, and feel free to keep discussing things in the chat. Oh, and Jason's got a question. Do you give mouse with your Chromebooks? Yes, we do. We give a mouse and a set of earbuds. Great, thanks for checking in, everybody. We are going to move into the resource sharing section of the session. I'm going to take this first set of resources, and we're actually going to go to these websites and explore around a little bit and show you what they have to offer. So the first one that I want to talk about is the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. They are as you can guess, a national organization, and they are very heavily promoting digital navigators as a solution to some of our digital equity issues in our country. And as a result, they have put together a whole toolkit on their website for programs that want to get started with this work. And if you scroll down on this page, you'll get some definitions and some kind of overview information like we're providing now. But down at the bottom is resources. So they have things like a skills assessment that a navigator can use the first time that they work with an individual to find out where are their skills at and what do they need to work on. And then follow-up surveys for those. If you're thinking about hiring someone or even making a volunteer posting and you want a job description, they have an example job description, which I'm going to actually open up here. Right, so you don't have to start from scratch with thinking about how do I write this job description? What are the skills that are required for this? They've got a sample that you can use. They have an intake form that you might use or that a navigator might use when working with a new client that just kind of walks through, okay, what kind of device are you using? what kind of issues do you have that you want help with? And then just some, follow-up questions like, okay, how did you hear about us? And who is being assigned to work with this individual? So an intake form for a Navigator program. And they have a not huge, probably 20-page digital Navigator toolkit, just to kind of walk through thinking about, all right, I'm going to start this program. What do I need to think about? What are the considerations? Who should I be partnering with? If I'm thinking about hiring someone, what should I think about when I'm doing that? What training are they going to need? It's really quite thorough and totally free, and you can download from their website and just read that as sort of the book on how to start doing digital navigation. It's a really great resource. All right, I'm going to head back over to my slides, and then I'm going to pop into the next one, which is from Literacy Minnesota. So last year, we had some funding in the supplemental services grant to prepare some materials for digital navigation, and particularly for training volunteers to be digital navigators in your community. And in that project, we put together training materials, PowerPoint with all the notes for delivering that, a handbook for digital navigators, assessment forms that a navigator can use to think about where are we at as an organization and what do we need to add to increase our digital equity services. There's an assessment form for learners and a digital skill checklist. I'll just open up this digital navigator handbook. This one is not a PDF, it's a Word document you can download. But again, it walks you through how to be a digital navigator, right? In 5,687.2 steps. But it really thinks about, again, that whole learner approach, assessing needs, making sure they have access and training for skills, and also tech support, and that wraparound navigation piece. So all of that is included in our digital navigator handbook. And these are really, like I said, intended for programs that want to train volunteers to do this work. And so you don't have to start from scratch on the training, you can just use our resources.
Susan, it might be interesting to note that at least some of what went into that grew out of a Literacy Minnesota project fairly soon after the COVID pandemic began, where we were working with the Ramsey County workforce, they call it workforce solutions, but our workforce centers. And they had a chunk of funding that they were using to distribute computers to a number of people, low-income people in the county, and then asked Literacy Minnesota to hire some digital navigators to actually implement the training, which gave us a really nice practical base on which to build. And one of the things, if you're ever trying to persuade anybody you work with about the value, the economic value of digital navigation, part of that project, we hired a professional firm to do an evaluation. And they showed that for every dollar spent on digital navigation, the return on investment was $2.40 in increased earnings, well-being, and other cost savings for the people that were able to access the digital navigators. So I thought that was fairly significant.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that, Tom. All right, and then the last one on this slide that I wanted to show everybody is brand new. It just came out at the COABE conference last week and in email inboxes this week. And this is less specifically for digital navigators per se, and really focused on folks who are new to serving digital literacy. But it would be a very good starting place for a volunteer or someone else who's new to this work and thinking about adult learning and digital literacy and the needs of adult learners. So it's a guide from the Barbara Bush Foundation and Digital Promise on adult literacy, digital literacy. And if you just scroll down, there's a link here, you can download it. It is a nice PDF. It's 80 pages long, and it walks through thinking about all different aspects of digital literacy and how to provide high quality services to adult learners. And it's really targeted at folks who've not done this work before. So if you do have new volunteers or new staff members, this is a really great resource to share with them.
I've heard so far, oops.
Yep, go right ahead.
I've heard so far really good feedback about this guide, that it's really quite well done, quite valuable. Just as a point of interest, Leah Hauge, who works at Literacy Minnesota, primarily as curriculum manager for Northstar, helped with the final editing and putting together of this. So we're kind of proud to be part of that. So
Thanks, Tom.
So
all right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about another kind of resources, which is resources for teaching digital skills. And Tom is going to kick us off by talking a little bit about Northstar. And do you want to go to the Northstar site, or do you want to just talk about it on the slide?
you can go to it if you'd like to, but most of you probably are somewhat familiar with Northstar, since the standards are part of our ABE standards. But Northstar, it consists of 3 main components. The first is a series of assessments if you can skim down that page, maybe Susan, to the take an assessment part, it'll be interesting. So we have 3 sets of assessments. The first is essential computer skills, which includes things like email, using the internet, basic computers, so on. Then we have essential software skills, which are basically things you would use in an office or in the classroom, the Microsoft Word suite, Microsoft Suite, as well as Google Docs. And then a growing area of using technology in daily life, social media, information literacy, which I think is a really important thing that digital navigators can work with students on, since lack of information literacy is a huge problem in society. And we'll be adding another one next week on telehealth, helping people learn how to use the computer for telehealth. So we're really proud of this. We have Northstar now in 9 countries, over 2,500 sites, and nearly 6 million assessments have been given. So we're proud of doing that, and it has come out of Minnesota. We want to go to what is the next one? The Digital Skills Library. Susan, since you're in charge of that, if you want to pull that up. Do you want to talk about that one? I think you're more familiar with that.
Yes, sorry, I'm just having trouble with my Zoom controls here. I couldn't get my camera and microphone back on, but here I am, I'm back. So the Digital Skills Library is actually a project that has come out of the national project called Digital Resilience in the American Workforce, which is collaborative project between Jobs for the Future and the EdTech Center at World Education. And the Digital Skills Library is a new website that is organizing digital skills educational materials into one place from many different resource providers. And you can explore by domain, like communication or gateway skills, which are your beginning things like mouse and keyboard, up through more complicated and challenging things like privacy and security, right? You can browse by domain, or you can also look by provider or format. So let's say you just wanted to find things that are tutorials, or you wanted to find full lesson plans, or you were looking for some quizzes. Right? So you can search by format, or you can also search by provider. So if you know, hey, I really like materials from digitallearn.org, I want to see all of their stuff, you can just search by that provider. You can take a look at the News Literacy Project. So if maybe you are working on more of that information literacy, making sure that people are media savvy, you can look for stuff from the News Literacy Project. So you can search by provider, you can search by format, or you can browse by domain. And this is a growing resource, so you can also submit things. So if you happen to know of a really good resource that isn't listed in the Digital Skills Library, you just come up here to this button at the top and say submit a resource, and it will be added to the Digital Skills Library. So this is crowdsourced materials that teachers are using and talking about, and it's all organized in one place in a nice findable way. And this is all completely nonprofit and free, so no advertising or other annoyances on the website.
And
And then the last one, oh, did you have a question, Tom?
No, go ahead.
Go ahead. Then the last one on the digital skills page I wanted to highlight is the digital navigator resources from Digital Us. And so this actually could have gone either in the how to start digital navigation or in the digital skills section, because it's both. So this is from Digital Us, and they have a resource hub. So they do have things like digital navigator training guide, right? But they also have things for people who are doing digital navigation work and need resources, right? So they have, like the digital skills library, things sort of organized by topic area: computer fundamentals, communication, online basics, looking for jobs, various topics that you can find here. So let's say we open this one up, and then you can see that they've got different resources here that you can look at and use with the clients when you're working with them as a digital navigator. So all of
Susan,
these are also free.
we have a chat question from Brian Tollison asking whether any of these various resources are multilingual or not.
Some of the resources in the digital skills library are multilingual, yes. Not a whole lot yet in languages other than Spanish, but that is a category on the digital skills library. And if you are familiar with resources in other languages and want to submit them, they would be thrilled to have them.
Also should probably mention that Northstar is involved in a massive translation project right now where we're going to be providing everything in Spanish, hopefully, as well as other languages further down the line. And our first basic computer module will probably be available sometime this summer. So it's a pretty massive undertaking, but look, you can look forward to that. So
that's great, Tom.
So,
and a good question. So thanks for asking it, Brian.
So we want to go to the next.
The next one is devices and access, and this is yours, Tom.
Yes, okay. So part of digital navigation can include helping people get connected to broadband and getting the computers that they need. So we've listed 3 different resources that may be useful to you. I've personally worked a lot with PCs for People, and I have not worked with Human IT, but it's a very similar program, I understand. Both of these are nonprofits, and they provide computers for people. At least PCs for People takes massive numbers of computers and updates them and wipes everything off of them, updates them, and then gives them to people or sells them at a very, very low rate. Both of them also will help people sign up for the low-cost broadband plans that are now available. So these can be really helpful to programs that are just need to get computers for people or get connectivity for people. And then the Affordable Connectivity Program is federal, and so there's probably more paperwork involved with that. But it also provides access to broadband services, as well as access to computer devices as needed. So why don't we go on to the next slide, which I think is a chat box check-in. So I'd like to be kind of curious to know what resources some of you are using for digital skills training or digital navigation, whether you're using any of the ones we've talked about, or whether you found some other ones, because things are developing very quickly. You can either talk out or just put something in the chat. See, Miles has used PCs for People. Northstar website. And if you know of any other organizations that we would all want to know about, if you can list those, that would be helpful. So sounds like Northstar is pretty popular. On personal level, I find very gratifying and nice. although we don't provide computers for people. But. Okay, well, I just got a message from our host that we have 10 minutes more. So I do want to go on to the next final section of our presentation, which is to begin thinking about the Digital Equity Act, which is a massive act passed a few months ago by Congress, which is going to really provide some tremendous resources for communities all over the country. So if you can go on to the next slide. This is a basic timeline, and you may want to be thinking about what's going on because some of you may want to be involved later on in some local projects to apply for funding. So the Basic Act was passed in November of 2021 as part of the big federal infrastructure legislation, which we all heard a lot about in the media. And right now everyone is getting, there's a planning process going on with the National Governors Association and other groups that will culminate in May of grants of $1 million to each state to do planning around digital equity. So we don't know yet in Minnesota exactly who's going to be in charge of that. Our assumption is probably that DEED will be, although we don't know that for certain. But this is going to be a really important thing to keep your eyes on because we want to make sure that the needs of our adult learners are taken into account when they start doing their planning at the state level. And it's not just direct employment focused, but broader than that. So all the states will then spend a year in this digital equity planning process. And then next summer, they'll release an RFP sort of thing for almost 1.44 billion in formula funds. And those go out to all the states. And those will be given out, as I understand it, based on the plans that the students have developed, that the states have developed. And then there will be additional 1.25 billion in competitive grants to states and other eligible entities. And I haven't studied that a lot, but it's very likely that educational groups can be part of those collaboratives that are applying for funds. So this is something we really need as a field to keep our eye on to try to influence the planning process. You'll probably be getting alerts from Literacy Action Network, maybe from the state staff, I don't know, about what's happening and what's available, who you need to call to find things out and to make your needs known. So we will also try through the Supplemental Services Tech Grant to keep people informed of what's going on with that, at least in broad general terms. Susan, NOFO sounds for notice of funding offer, I think. Not positive. Funding opportunity, thank you. I see that in chat now.
Yep, notice of funding opportunity. And so this is federal money. And so the federal agency will be notifying states that, hey, there's this federal funding available, right? So you can access it.
Right. And
then they will simultaneously have federal grants that people can apply for. And I did attend a couple of sessions at last week's National COABE conference talking about the Digital Equity Act and listing eligible applicants to receive these funds. And educational institutions are mentioned by name, as are libraries and community anchor institutions, they refer to them, but that would include, housing providers and libraries and nonprofit organizations. So there are many different adult ed providers who will be eligible for funding under the DEA. But like Tom said, there's going to be a state plan, and then the state funds are going to be used to execute the state plan. So we want to make sure that our learners and our needs and our programs needs are represented in that state plan, because if they aren't, the funds won't flow in the ways that we need them to.
Right. I also think that when we get to the point where actual applications are being solicited and accepted, those programs that have built close working relationships with their local workforce center, community colleges, and city and county government will probably have a leg up. I doubt they're going to be directly funding individual ABE programs, but they probably will, it's my guess, will fund consortiums and collaboratives where local parties are gathered together working on this. So,
and the grant funds, as far as I understand from my reading of the presentation that I went to at COABE, can be for devices, it can be for internet access, but it can also be for skills training, for digital navigation work, for So the service side as well as the getting people connected side. So we definitely want to make sure that adult educators are there and representing their concerns so that it doesn't, like Tom said, become strictly workforce related. We want to make sure that people are taking into consideration parents and their needs for helping their kids and navigating medical websites and all the other issues that impact people that are really critical with digital equity, but aren't about jobs.
Brian, I noticed you've put a comment in there about that there are a lot of proposals that favor the urban areas. I have not really heard that. So if you have any further information you'd like to share with the group, we'd be happy to have you talk for a minute.
Sure. One of the things, so working in Todd County, they've just done some research and surveys, and statewide, Todd County was recognized as the second least served or underserved county in the state. And one of the things that they were pointing out is there's already, with the upgrades and everything, there's already things, 4G to 5G. There's things going on in more urban areas, upgrading that, where we're not even able to get reliable Wi-Fi into rural areas. I mean, and that's, people are using their phone in order to be digitally connected, and and then they're using their phone service. They cannot get a reliable Wi-Fi connection.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of that is because around this region, there's 7-8 different service providers that are at odds with each other because they don't want to cross each other's boundaries.
Yeah, it's like a localized monopoly, right? And then the prices have inflated because there isn't any real competition. So they're essentially manipulating the price for the market. Mm-hmm.
Well, it's even worse than that, in that somebody has gone and laid in fiber or cable to provide connection into a certain area, and another company, will be a block away or at the end of the road, and they won't go extend any further to a house that's 1/10 of a mile up the driveway because somebody has a cable already in place.
Yep. Yeah. That's really frustrating. Yeah, so that does bring up a good point, which is that the funding in the federal legislation that authorized the funding for the DEA, there's also a funding chunk for broadband extension. The stuff in the DEA is not really, it's not the infrastructure piece. There is an infrastructure piece that's kind of separate. This is more for devices and subsidizing people's ability to connect once they have broadband in their area. And it's more on skills training, digital literacy skills. But there is also a chunk in this infrastructure bill for broadband expansion. And that's probably what you're talking about, is that it's kind of piecemeal and it's not necessarily like strategically planned to be the best service to the provider. Unfortunately, a lot of internet service providers are, like you said, and they're in competition, and the result is consumer unfriendly practices.
If you have a special interest in this particular, in this whole act, the National Digital Inclusion Alliance has a listserv that anybody can sign up for, that I subscribe to. You can get a digest once a day or once a week or whatever. Some of it's not terribly interesting, but they really do cover these emerging issues really quite well. So if you have the interest in following that, I would really recommend that.
I definitely recommend following the NDIA. They are the leaders nationally on this issue, and they were instrumental in getting the DEA passed and making sure that it really does include skills training and not just broadband expansion. So yeah, I would definitely recommend checking them out.
It's looking like it's 3 o'clock, so I don't know if we have any. They're probably going to cut us off soon. So if there's any questions that you'll have,
we are at
quickly, ask them quickly.
the slide, so we're great. We are exactly on time, Tom.
Well, and this is the last session of the day, so if we go a little bit long, it's not going to hurt. Nobody's going to miss any other sessions. But yeah, if everybody's getting close to wrapping up, we can wrap up. Otherwise, let's let it go a little bit longer.
Yeah, we could take a few more questions, and if there aren't any, we can stop the recording and call it a day.
And that's awesome. I haven't heard Starlink being up or people being on Starlink. How well is that working for you?
It is great, and it allows me to work on the weekends when I'm at the cabin and looking at the lake, and it's $110 a month, $500 to install it. You need a clear view of the sky, and it allows, I mean, it's as fast as our internet at home, or nearly as fast.
Wow.
So it's a possibility, and not that expensive for people. I mean, yes, it's expensive, but I think if there are funds available to get the startup going, I think it could be really a game changer for people in our neck of the woods in northern Minnesota.
And it's
Very nice.
possible that the federal ACP, the Affordable Connectivity Program, could help people who are low income afford a service like that. That's what the ACP is for, right?
Mhm.
Is to, it doesn't provide, it's not an internet service provider. It helps subsidize you purchasing a regular internet service provider.
Right. And if for just a point of reference, I got it going and I run the app, and I am not a spring chicken. And no ages to. They really say
that's
anybody can install it. My husband and I installed it. I set up the link, and I run the app, and the app is amazing, and there's tech support is great. And if Putin doesn't shoot the satellites out of the sky, we're good to go. He's threatened
Let's
to
hope
do
that
that.
doesn't happen for many, many reasons.
That would be difficult to get done. I did see a chat in there. Somebody asking about how do we get our CEUs. The link to get your CEUs is in the chat right now. And that's also where you do your evaluation. So if you go and click those in, you will be pulled up to a spot where you can do an evaluation. And after you do your evaluation, it will send your CEUs to you. The slides will be posted along with a recording of this on the Atlas website. You'll be able to go back in and find them.
And we'll make sure they're in that participant materials folder for the conference as well.
Correct.
Yep, I have already made a PDF copy of it, Andy. It's in our presenter folder. If you want to just throw it in that participant folder anytime, you can.
Will do.
And you,
And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.